The first rays of dawn crept gently over the thatched rooftops of the village, washing the earth in a soft golden hue. Smoke began to curl from clay chimneys as the scent of roasted maize and wood fire mingled in the crisp morning air. Birds sang from the baobab branches, their calls weaving into the rhythm of pounding mortars and the distant hum of voices preparing for the day. Amid this quiet harmony moved a young woman named Amara, known throughout the village for her gentle spirit and tireless hands. She rose before the sun as she always did, her movements graceful and deliberate, guided by the rhythm of purpose that had shaped her since childhood. Her home, modest but tidy, stood on the edge of the main path. Its courtyard was lined with smooth stones and shaded by an old fig tree her late father had planted. Inside, woven baskets filled with grains and herbs rested neatly along the walls. Every object seemed to bear the imprint of her care, the calabash bowls polished to a sheen, the water pot always cool and full, the small clay figurine of her ancestors kept clean and decorated with fresh cowrie shells. Her mother, once strong but now frail, often said that Amara carried the heart of 3 women in one body, gentle, wise, and steady as the earth itself. Amara's day began with quiet devotion. She knelt before the family altar, murmuring words of gratitude for life, for her mother's health, and for the village's peace. The flickering oil lamp cast soft shadows on her face, revealing the calm strength in her eyes. Though her family had little, Amara believed deeply in balance, that kindness returned like a river's curve, that honesty stood longer than any lie, and that a soul anchored in truth could not be shaken by misfortune. These beliefs had been her compass since her father's death, guiding her through loss and hardship with grace. By sunrise she was already at work. She carried water from the stream, her steps steady, her back straight, humming softly as she walked. Along the way villagers greeted her warmly. "Morning light, Amara," they would call, and she would answer with her gentle smile. Children ran to her for help tying wrappers or mending torn calabashes, and she never refused. To the elders she was a daughter, to the young a sister. Her humility wrapped around her like the soft cloth she wore, unassuming yet dignified. In the fields beyond the village she worked with quiet diligence. Her hands, though small, were skilled and strong. She tended to the cassava shoots, loosened the soil around the yam mounds, and gathered vegetables for her mother's stew. When she paused to rest, she would lift her face to the sky and breathe deeply, feeling the warmth of the sun and the weight of peace. It was in these moments that she felt closest to her father's spirit, as if his voice still echoed in the rustle of the leaves, reminding her to live truthfully, work hard, and keep her heart free of bitterness. Her stepsister, Adiz, often passed by with an air of superiority, mocking Amara's simple ways. "You waste your youth on soil and sweat," she would sneer, her bracelets jingling as she walked. But Amara only smiled and said, "The soil remembers who feeds it." She never responded with anger, for she had learned that envy fades faster than kindness endures. Even when Adiz's words stung, Amara found solace in her mother's quiet pride, in the honest fruits of her labor, and in the rhythm of her village, where every sunrise promised a chance to begin again. As the sun climbed higher, the day came alive with color and sound. Market laughter, grinding stones, children's chatter, and the distant beating of drums. Amara carried her harvest back home, her heart light with contentment. She had no wealth or luxury, but she had peace, respect, and purpose. The village might have seen her as just another hard-working girl, but beneath her calm spirit burned a quiet courage, a strength yet untested. She did not know it yet, but the same dawn that kissed her peaceful morning would soon give rise to a storm that would test her faith and reveal the true power of her honesty. For even in the gentlest heart, destiny plants the seed of fire, and Amara's test was drawing near. The morning began like any other, with the sun rising lazily over the hills and the village stirring to life. Amara had just finished sweeping the courtyard when a sudden cry broke through the calm, a sharp, trembling voice from the center of the compound. It was Madame Ifioma, her employer, calling out for her husband's sacred gold pendant, a symbol of honor passed down through generations. The entire household froze as her voice rose in panic. "It was right here. I placed it on the stool last night before we slept." Servants rushed in, eyes wide with fear, knowing the weight of such a loss. The pendant was not just an ornament, it was a mark of legacy, of protection, and the chief's personal charm against misfortune. Amara set down her broom and hurried toward the commotion. Madame Ifioma stood by the doorway, her wrapper loosely tied, her hands trembling as she pointed to the empty stool. The chief himself, stern and silent, examined the spot. "No one leaves until this is found," he said in a voice that cut through the murmurs like a blade. The servants began to search everywhere, Under mats, behind jars, even inside cooking pots. The courtyard became a scene of frantic activity. Amara joined in the search, her heart pounding not from guilt, but from fear of what suspicion could bring. Minutes turned to an hour and still nothing was found. The air grew thick with unease. Madame Ifeoma's eyes, sharp as hawk talons, began to dart from face to face. "Who was in the room last night?" she demanded. A servant answered timidly, "Only Amara cleaned there before evening." She dusted the stools. The moment the words left his mouth, silence fell. Amara froze, her hands still holding a small broom. The chief's gaze turned toward her, unreadable but heavy. Madame Ifeoma's lips tightened into a line. "So," she said slowly, "the girl who pretends to be so humble and good has long fingers after all." Amara's heart dropped. "No, Mama Ifeoma, I only cleaned the floor and left. I never touched the pendant." Her voice trembled, but her eyes remained clear. "I swear on my father's grave and my mother's life, I would never steal." But words carried little power against fear. Once suspicion rooted itself, it spread like wildfire. Another servant whispered, "She was alone in the room for a long time." Someone else added, "She's been coming early these days, maybe she planned this." The murmurs grew thick with accusation. Madame Ifeoma's anger flared. "You dare swear before me?" she shouted, her hand striking the air. "Do you think your sweet words can hide your crime?" Amara knelt, tears burning her eyes. "I am innocent," she said again, her voice breaking. But no one listened. The chief, known for his stern justice, stepped forward. "Until the pendant is found, the one with access bears the guilt," he declared. The verdict was final. Madame Ifeoma's expression hardened with triumph and outrage mixed together. She ordered the servants to seize Amara. "Beat the truth from her if you must. Let her confess before this curse brings ruin on the household." Amara's world blurred. Rough hands grabbed her arms, dragging her to the center of the courtyard. The morning sun glared down, merciless and bright, as the whispers of the villagers gathered beyond the fence. "The quiet girl?" someone gasped. "I never believed she could steal." Another said, "It's always the ones who act most innocent." The sting of betrayal cut deeper than any whip could. These were the same voices that once greeted her with warmth, now turned against her without question. Her pleas echoed through the compound, unanswered. With every lash of humiliation, tears streamed down her face, not for pain but for the disbelief that filled her chest. How easily trust could turn to cruelty. How quickly a name could be stained by lies. She looked up at the chief and Madame Ifeoma through blurred vision. "You will see," she whispered hoarsely. "The truth cannot stay buried forever." But her words were drowned out by the sound of her own suffering and the murmurs of judgment. When the beating ended, she lay on the dusty ground, her body trembling and her spirit heavy. The chief turned away, muttering about curses and lost honor. Madame Ifeoma spat at the earth beside Amara's feet. "Take her away," she said coldly. "Let her face the shame she brought upon herself." The servants hesitated, pity flickering in their eyes, but fear kept them silent. Amara dragged herself to her feet, her dignity battered but not broken. She gathered what little strength she had and walked away from the compound, the villagers' eyes following her like shadows. She did not cry aloud. Instead, she held her pain deep within, her heart whispering to the heavens for justice. As she crossed the edge of the village, the sun that once greeted her every morning now seemed harsh and distant. She looked back once, her face streaked with tears and dust, and murmured to herself, "If the truth still lives, I will find it." And with that vow burning quietly inside her, she disappeared into the horizon, leaving behind a world that had turned its back on her. The sun hung low, its rays slicing through the dust that rose from the village square. The air was heavy with judgment and whispers. The young woman, Amara, knelt on the ground, her arms trembling as her stepmother's voice cut through the murmurs. "Thief." The word burned into her like fire. The accusation had spread like wind-fed flame, that she had stolen the missing gold bangle belonging to her employer, a respected trader in the village. Amara's voice broke as she tried to explain, her eyes glistening with tears. "I did not take it. I swear on my mother's spirit." But her pleas fell on deaf ears. Her stepsister crossed her arms, lips curled into a cruel smirk, pretending sorrow while fanning the anger of the onlookers. "She was the last to clean the trader's room," she said. "Who else could it be?" The crowd began to mutter. Old women shook their heads and children peered from behind door frames. The trader's wife spat on the ground near Amara's feet, her words sharp as stones. "You were trusted, girl. How could you?" Her stepmother stepped forward, her face twisted in rage. "You shame this house," she hissed, and before Amara could move, a heavy slap landed across her face. The force of it sent her stumbling to the ground. Her stepsister joined in, her blows driven by envy that had festered for years, envy of Amara's beauty, her kindness, her quiet grace that drew others' respect. Amara cried out, not only from the pain of the beating but from the crushing betrayal. These were the people she had cooked for, served, and trusted. Wooden sticks struck her back, her arms, her legs, until her breath came out in ragged sobs. Dust clung to her skin, mixing with blood and tears. Around her, the villagers looked on, some with pity, some with silent approval, others afraid to intervene. When the traitor himself arrived, his face stern and unforgiving, Amara crawled forward, trembling. "Sir, please?" "I didn't do it," she whispered, her voice cracking. But he turned away, his tone cold. "If you are innocent, the spirits will reveal it. Until then, you are nothing but a disgrace." The words shattered what little strength she had left. She lay there, her body broken, her spirit flickering like a dying flame. The world blurred around her, voices, dust, and pain blending into one endless ache. She remembered her late mother's teachings. Truth walks slowly, but it never loses its way. But in that moment, the truth felt far away, drowned beneath cruelty and shame. When they finally left her lying in the courtyard, the crowd dispersed, carrying their gossip to every corner of the village. "Amara the thief," they whispered. "Even the kind-hearted can hide a dark hand." Night fell slowly. The stars blinked awake, indifferent to her suffering. Her body ached with every breath, but it was the ache in her heart that nearly broke her. She pressed her hand to her chest, feeling the slow, painful beat of her heart. "Why?" she whispered to the night. "Why would they do this to me?" In the stillness, a soft breeze swept over her face, carrying the scent of wildflowers. For the first time since the beating began, she felt a strange calm. The wind seemed to murmur something, faint, almost like words from another world. It wasn't comfort but a promise, that her truth would not stay buried forever. She gathered her strength, dragging herself toward the hut. Her skin throbbed, her lips were cracked, and her spirit bruised. Yet deep within her, something small but unbreakable stirred. A quiet resolve. They had beaten her for a mistake she didn't make, but Amara's soul, though battered, refused to bow. Somewhere beyond the pain she felt it, a shift in the air, a whisper of fate preparing to reveal what the world refused to see. "You said." The dawn after her humiliation arrived in silence. No roosters crowed, no children's laughter echoed in the streets. The world itself seemed to hold its breath as Amara stood before the hut that no longer felt like home. Her face was swollen, her arms marked with bruises, and her eyes, though rimmed with tears, still glowed with a fragile defiance. Her stepmother's voice from inside was cold and sharp. "Leave this house, Amara. You've brought enough disgrace upon us. The spirits will not forgive a thief." No one came to stop her as she gathered what little she owned, a threadbare cloth, a small calabash for water, and a beaded necklace her mother had left her. Her stepsister watched from the doorway, pretending sorrow, but her smirk betrayed her satisfaction. "Maybe the forest will believe your lies," she murmured. Amara said nothing. She simply turned and walked, her bare feet pressing into the dust, each step a quiet rebellion. The village that had once greeted her with smiles now averted its gaze. Women she had helped at the river whispered behind their hands. Men she had greeted with respect turned away. Even the children, taught by gossiping mothers, pointed at her and said, "That's the girl who stole the gold." Shame burned through her hotter than any wound. She wanted to scream her innocence, to tear the sky open and make the truth fall like rain, but the weight of disbelief silenced her. She walked until the huts became distant shapes and the air thickened with the scent of earth and wild leaves. At the edge of the forest she stopped. The tall trees loomed like silent witnesses, their branches whispering in a language she could almost understand. She sank to her knees near a large rock by the riverside, her reflection trembling in the rippling water. The face that stared back looked like a stranger, eyes swollen from tears, lips cracked, dust clinging to her skin. Amara pressed her palms together, her voice breaking as she prayed. "Great spirits of my ancestors, my mother, if you can hear me, you know I did not steal. Let truth walk before me. Let justice find me even if the world has turned its back." The river's gentle song seemed to answer, its surface shimmering as the morning sun climbed higher. The forest, too, seemed to listen, birds falling silent as if her pain had reached even their small hearts. She took comfort in the rhythm of nature, in the hum of unseen life. Though she was cast out, she felt less alone among the trees than she ever had among her kin. Days passed in quiet survival. She made a small shelter from palm leaves and slept on the cool earth. Each dawn, she washed her wounds in the river, whispering her story to the flowing water as though it could carry her truth to those who had condemned her. Her body healed slowly, but the ache inside remained, a mixture of sorrow, anger, and a fierce spark of determination. At night, she lay under the stars, tracing constellations her mother had once shown her. "Every soul has its star," her mother had said. "When you are wronged, look up, the stars remember." Amara looked up now, searching for her mother's star, and when she found it, her tears fell silently onto the ground. "I will not let this lie be my ending," she whispered. The wind rose gently, brushing her hair back, carrying her words through the trees. She felt something stir within her, not just faith but a quiet strength. She would find out who had truly committed the crime. She would return not as a broken girl but as the truth itself. Her exile, though born of shame, began to feel like a test, a sacred trial that would forge her spirit. The forest no longer seemed cruel but protective, the river no longer sorrowful but guiding. Amara lifted her face to the moonlight, the bruises on her skin glowing faintly in its silver light. "They beat me for a sin I didn't commit," she said softly, "but the spirits know. They will show me the path." And somewhere deep in the forest, a night bird called, a sound that felt like an answer. Amara wrapped her arms around herself and let sleep take her, her resolve unshaken. She was not lost. She was becoming. "You said." The nights near the forest were heavy with silence, the kind that carried weight and meaning. Each sound seemed to breathe, the rustle of leaves, the murmur of water, the distant hum of insects. Amara had begun to find strange comfort in that quiet, though a deeper stillness often lingered after dusk, as if the world waited for something to be spoken. On one such night, as the moon rose full and bright, she lay beneath the canopy of stars, her thoughts restless. Her heart still ached from the injustice, yet a sliver of peace had taken root in her, a fragile trust that time or the spirits would reveal what words could not. She turned on her mat of woven reeds trying to sleep when she heard it, a faint murmur soft as wind through grass. At first she thought it was the river speaking, its steady flow forming shapes of sound. But then she realized the voice was too deliberate, too knowing. It was not the river. It was something else. "Amara?" The whisper seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. Her breath caught in her chest. She sat up, her eyes scanning the shadows. The fire she had built earlier had burned low, leaving only embers that glowed like small red eyes in the dark. The voice came again, this time lower, carrying the weight of something ancient. "Do not be afraid. The truth is near." Her heart pounded. She wanted to speak, to ask who it was, but her lips felt sealed by awe. She had heard stories all her life, tales told by elders around fires, of ancestors who spoke to the living when the world's balance tilted toward injustice. Perhaps it was her mother's spirit, or one of the old guardians of the land. "Who are you?" she finally whispered. The forest seemed to answer with a gust of wind that rippled through the trees, making them sigh as though releasing secrets. Then came a faint image in her mind, a flash of a familiar face, blurred and shadowed. The whisper spoke again, more distinct now, the tone carrying both warning and tenderness. "You were not the hand that took what was lost. The one you trusted most hides behind your pain. Look where fire met cloth, where envy met deceit." The words made her shiver. Her thoughts turned back to the day of the accusation, her stepsister's trembling hands, the strange nervousness in her eyes as she accused Amara first. The whisper seemed to confirm what her heart had suspected but had been too broken to consider. The betrayal had come from within her own home. Amara pressed her palm to her chest. "Why me?" she murmured. "Why must I suffer for what I did not do?" The voice softened. "Because the spirit of truth walks a hard path. Only those strong in heart can bear its weight. But your pain is not wasted. It lights the way." Tears welled in her eyes. The air around her seemed to hum, alive with presence. Not frightening but powerful, ancient, loving. The trees swayed though no wind touched them, and the river glistened as if reflecting unseen stars. She felt surrounded by unseen watchers, protectors perhaps, their whispers echoing like faint drums in her soul. Then, as suddenly as it began, the presence faded, leaving her in silence once more. But this silence was no longer empty, it was full of promise. Amara wiped her tears, her resolve hardening. If the spirits had spoken, it meant there was a path forward. She would seek the truth step by step, no matter how hidden it lay or who trembled when it was found. As dawn's first light touched the horizon, she whispered her vow into the morning air. I will uncover what you've shown me. I will not rest until the truth stands tall like the Irako tree. And though no voice answered this time, the wind carried her words through the forest, as if sealing her promise to the ancestors who had chosen her. You said. The following days brought a new rhythm to Amara's solitude. Each morning she awoke before sunrise, her heart steadied by purpose. The whispers of the night had planted a seed of clarity within her, and though she could not see the full picture yet, she felt the path to truth calling her like a drumbeat beneath the earth. She began to observe, to listen, and to move with quiet intent, knowing that the smallest clue could unravel the lies that had bound her. When she ventured into the village again, she wrapped her head in a faded cloth, hoping to go unnoticed. The people, still wary, glanced her way but said nothing. To them she was still the disgraced girl, the thief cast out. But that invisibility became her gift. Hidden in plain sight, she began to see what she had once overlooked. The first sign came at the market. She stood by the yam seller's stall, pretending to examine the roots, when she saw her stepsister, Adana, whispering to a young man near the palm wine vendor. Their conversation was hurried, tense. The man's eyes darted around as if fearing to be seen, and when he handed her a small bundle wrapped in palm leaves, Adana's hands trembled before she slipped it into her basket. Amara's heart quickened. Adana rarely came to the market herself. Her stepmother often sent others in her place. Why now? And why so secretive? When she returned to her small shelter by the forest, Amara unwrapped her thoughts like threads. The whisper in the night had said, "Look where fire met cloth, where envy met deceit." Her clothes, the ones burned when she was cast out, had been kept near the storage hut. It was also where the missing item had been last seen. Her stepsister had been the one to find the empty space and raise the alarm first. Now, the memory of Adana's trembling hands and pale face made the pieces begin to shift. The next day she returned to the village outskirts before dawn. She hid behind the grove near her old home, watching. The compound stirred slowly, the smoke from cooking fires curling into the air. Her stepmother emerged, scolding the servants, while Adana lingered by the same hut, the one they had forbidden Amara to enter since her accusation. When her stepmother went inside, Adana knelt near the wall and brushed something beneath the woven mats. The movement was small, quick, but Amara's sharp eyes caught it. A flicker of guilt, a motion of concealment. A pang of anger surged through her. How easily they had cast her away, all the while hiding behind lies. But she forced herself to remain calm. The spirits had told her to be patient. Truth, like dawn, rose slowly but could not be stopped. Later that evening she went to the old palm tree near the river, a place where the villagers often came to gossip, thinking no one listened. Two women spoke there, their voices carrying over the water. Amara crouched in the tall grass, listening. Did you hear? Chief's gold is still missing. But I saw Adana with a bracelet that looks too fine for her kind, one woman said. Maybe her mother's charms are paying off, the other replied, laughing softly. Or maybe she knows more than she lets on. The words hit Amara like a spark to dry leaves. The whispers of the spirits, the strange market meeting, the secret at the hut, all pointed toward Adana. Still, she needed more than suspicion. She needed truth in hand. That night, she waited until the village slept. Moving like a shadow, she crept toward her old home, her bare feet silent on the ground. The moonlight guided her path. At the back of the storage hut, she knelt and felt under the woven matting where Adana had hidden something earlier. Her fingers brushed against cool metal. She drew it out, a small ornament wrapped in old cloth, glinting faintly even in the dark. The chief's sacred ornament. The one she had been accused of stealing. Her heart thudded. For a long moment she just stared at it, trembling between fury and relief. The forest wind sighed through the trees as if confirming what she already knew. The spirits had guided her true. But Amara did not run to reveal the truth immediately. She wrapped the ornament carefully in her own cloth, whispering, "The time must be right." She would let the truth unfold not with chaos but with precision. As she stood, the first call of an owl echoed through the night, solemn, almost proud. The path of deceit was unraveling, and she was no longer the shamed girl the village mocked. She was a seeker now, a vessel of justice, and the spirits of her ancestors walked with her under the watchful stars. You said. The night she uncovered the ornament, Amara did not sleep. She sat by the river's edge, the moonlight rippling across the water like liquid truth, her hands trembling around the wrapped bundle. The realization was sharp and bitter. The same stepsister who had watched her beaten, who had smiled as she was cast out, was the true thief. It wasn't just betrayal, it was cruelty disguised as innocence. For a long while, Amara stared at the water, wondering what to do with the truth that now burned in her hands. Her first thought was of revenge, of storming back into the village at dawn, holding the ornament high for all to see. She could already imagine the faces: her stepmother's disbelief, Adana's terror, the villagers' shame. The same people who spat at her name would bow, begging forgiveness. But as she watched the reflection of the stars, another thought began to whisper, a gentler, deeper one. What would revenge bring her? Would it cleanse the wound or only deepen it? The river's current flowed steady and sure, and she remembered the night the spirits spoke to her. Only those strong in heart can bear the weight of truth. Perhaps this was that weight. Truth was not just about exposing the guilty, it was about choosing how to wield it. At dawn, she wrapped the ornament again and hid it beneath her mat. She spent the morning in silence, breathing, thinking. When she finally rose, she walked toward the village, not with rage but with calm, deliberate steps. The path was familiar yet foreign, lined with memories of laughter and betrayal. Children played by the roadside, their songs echoing through the morning mist, and for the first time she smiled faintly. The village had continued as though nothing had happened, but that illusion was about to end. When she reached the market square, she saw Adana there, speaking to the same young man she had seen before. He handed her another bundle, smaller this time, and her eyes darted nervously around. Amara watched from a distance, her pulse steady, her anger coiled but controlled. Then she noticed something, a flash of guilt on Adana's face, like a storm cloud passing over the sun. Amara approached quietly. "Adana," she said softly. The name alone made her stepsister flinch. When Adana turned, her face paled as if she had seen a ghost. "Amara? You shouldn't be here." "I live," Amara replied. "The spirits kept me." She studied her stepsister's trembling hands, the way she avoided her gaze. "You still hide things, I see." Adana stammered, I don't know what you mean." But her voice quivered like a trapped bird. Amara stepped closer, her tone calm but sharp as flint. "The truth has a way of walking through lies. It found me in the forest. It showed me what you did." Adana froze. The color drained from her face. For a moment, the marketplace noise faded. Only their breaths filled the space between them. "Please," Adana whispered, eyes wide with fear. "If you tell Mother, she'll cast me out. I didn't mean for them to hurt you that way. I only wanted them to think I was better, that I wasn't the useless one." The confession hung heavy in the air. Amara felt her heart twist, a storm of sorrow and anger and pity all at once. This was the truth she had sought, yet it felt heavier than she'd imagined. Her stepsister's tears did not erase the bruises she still carried. But deep inside she understood. Sometimes people wounded others because they were already broken themselves. She took a slow breath. "You took what was not yours," she said quietly. "And because of your lie I was beaten and shamed. But I will not let hate turn me into what you became." Adana looked at her, stunned. "You won't tell?" Amara's eyes were calm now, distant and knowing. "The spirits will decide how truth is revealed. But you will carry your own guilt longer than any exile could make you." With that, she turned away, leaving her stepsister trembling amid the whispers of the market. As she walked back toward the river, she felt lighter. The truth was hers now, and so was the power to decide how it shaped her. And though she chose wisdom over vengeance, she knew one thing with certainty: the days of her silence were over. "You said." The sun was sinking low when Amara decided to return to the village, not as a castaway begging for forgiveness, but as a woman who carried truth like fire in her heart. She had spent many days in the quiet company of the forest and the river, listening to her own courage grow. The whispers of the ancestors had faded, replaced now by the steady voice within her. It was time. The shame they had thrown upon her no longer belonged to her, it clung instead to the ones who had created it. She wrapped her mother's cloth around her shoulders and began the walk toward the village. Each step stirred memories: laughter at the well, the songs of harvest, the cries of children chasing chickens through the dusty streets. But beneath it all was a darker rhythm, the echo of the beating, the cries of her own pain. Now, however, she walked taller, her gaze steady on the horizon. When she reached the first cluster of huts, the chatter around her hushed. Women drawing water from the well froze mid-motion, their clay pots tilting dangerously. A group of men gambling with cowrie shells looked up, disbelief etched on their faces. "Is that not Amara?" one whispered. "She lives?" another set eyes wide. "I thought she had died in the forest," a woman murmured, clutching her wrapper tighter. Their voices rippled through the air like the rustle of dry leaves before a storm. Soon the entire marketplace knew. People peered from doorways, heads poked out of windows, and within moments the whispers became a wave. The disgraced girl has returned. But Amara did not flinch. She walked straight through the center of the market, her steps calm, her expression unreadable. Some villagers lowered their eyes in shame. Others stared with curiosity as though seeing a ghost. She could feel their judgment, their unease, and beneath that, something else, fear. The news reached her stepmother's compound before she arrived. When she stepped through the familiar wooden gate, her stepmother stood in the courtyard, flanked by Adana, whose face had lost all color. The older woman's voice trembled slightly, though she tried to sound stern. "So, you dare to return after what you've done? Have you come to curse us with your shame?" Amara met her gaze steadily. "No," she said. "I have come to speak the truth you all refused to hear." Her stepmother's eyes flickered. Adana shifted uneasily, her hands clasped tight, her mouth trembling as if to hold back words. The servants hovered nearby, whispering among themselves. "The truth?" her stepmother scoffed. "You speak of truth now? You who stole the chief's ornament." Amara reached slowly into the fold of her wrapper and brought out the small, wrapped bundle. Gasps filled the courtyard. She held it up for all to see, her voice calm but strong. "The ornament you said I stole, I found it where you least expected. Hidden beneath the mats near the storage hut. The spirits guided me there." Her stepmother's eyes widened, a shadow of panic crossing her face. Adana's breath caught audibly, her trembling visible even in the dim light. Amara continued, her voice ringing clear. "I left this village with nothing but pain. But the spirits of our ancestors do not sleep when injustice is done. They showed me the truth, that the hands that took this gold were not mine." A murmur spread among the onlookers. Some exchanged glances, others began to whisper Adana's name. The tension in the air thickened until it felt alive. Her stepmother's tone faltered. "What are you saying, child?" "I say that guilt has a face," Amara replied softly. "And it hides in your own house." Her eyes met Adana's, and for a moment silence ruled the courtyard. Adana's lips parted, but no words came. Her hands trembled violently. Then from the crowd an old woman, one of the elders, spoke. "Let the girl speak her truth. The ancestors do not reveal secrets for nothing." Amara turned to the gathered villagers. "You beat me. You spat at me. You called me a thief. Yet I returned not for revenge but for justice. The truth belongs to everyone, not only to those who are powerful." Her voice grew stronger and the people listened. Even her stepmother looked shaken, unsure whether to deny or stay silent. Adana's eyes filled with tears, her guilt trembling at the edges, threatening to spill over. The tension held the air hostage, thick with the weight of what was about to unfold. Everyone knew something had changed. The girl they had condemned was no longer weak. She stood before them like a mirror, reflecting their cruelty back at them. And though the truth had not yet been spoken aloud, it trembled in every breath, waiting for its moment to burst free, a moment that would either destroy what remained of her family or cleanse it forever. Night had fallen by the time she returned to the village square. The air was thick with murmurs, whispers that fluttered between curiosity and guilt. Some villagers pretended not to notice her, others stared, stunned to see her alive and unbroken. She had come back quietly, her eyes steady, her steps calm, carrying neither anger nor fear. She had learned too much in the forest to act recklessly. Tonight, she would let truth speak louder than any accusation. She went first to the household where she once worked, or to the family that had cast her out. Her former mistress, startled, dropped the bowl she was holding. The others froze. The young woman smiled faintly and greeted them with respect, her voice calm. "I have come," she said, "to serve once more. I wish to finish what was left undone." The statement puzzled everyone. How could she wish to serve again after being beaten and disgraced? But they allowed her inside, drawn by curiosity, their guilt masked beneath politeness. That night, she worked quietly as before, sweeping the yard, fetching water, tending to the fire. The same object that had gone missing, or something similar, was placed intentionally on a mat near the center of the courtyard. She ensured that everyone saw it. "This," she said softly, "is the chief's new ornament. It must not be lost." Then she walked away from it as she had on that fateful day, deliberately leaving the scene as before. Hours passed. The household went about their routines. But the young woman was watching carefully, not with her eyes, but with her instincts sharpened by suffering. She noticed how one person, the very one who had been the loudest during her accusation, seemed restless. Their hands trembled slightly. They avoided looking at the ornament, yet their gaze flickered toward it when they thought no one was watching. Later that evening, a commotion rose again. The ornament was gone. The villagers were called, torches lit, the same voices shouting the same words of accusation. But this time she was ready. "Let no one move," she said firmly. "If the spirits of truth are near, they will reveal the thief." Her voice carried with strange calm authority, and even the chief nodded gravely. She stepped forward and performed a simple act taught by her grandmother, a trick that seemed like magic. She sprinkled a thin line of flour across the courtyard, from the mat to the nearest doorways. "Let the guilty pass," she said, "and the spirits will mark their feet." One by one the villagers crossed. Each foot left white dust behind, except one. The flour had mysteriously vanished beneath that person's feet, as if swallowed by shame. Gasps echoed. It was the very person who had accused her first, perhaps her stepsister, perhaps a trusted servant. Their voice faltered, their hands shook, and when questioned they stammered nonsense. The young woman simply said, "You may confess now. The spirits are kind when truth is spoken, but cruel when it's hidden." Tears burst forth. The culprit fell to the ground, sobbing, admitting everything, the greed, the theft, the lie to save themselves. Silence fell. The villagers turned toward the young woman, their shame heavy as stone. The chief lowered his head. "You have done what even the elders could not," he said. "You exposed deceit with wisdom, not anger." She looked around, her eyes soft yet resolute. "Truth needs no shouting," she replied. "It only needs patience." That night, as torches dimmed and the crowd dispersed, she stood alone beneath the moonlight. The same people who had beaten her now bowed their heads in apology. But she did not gloat or curse. She simply walked away, knowing that her dignity had been restored not by revenge, but by cleverness, courage, and faith. In the quiet that followed, a whisper moved through the village, a story that would be told for generations. The girl who returned not with anger, but with wisdom sharper than any blade. The next morning, the sun rose over the village with a heavy silence. The air, once thick with gossip and accusation, now trembled with guilt. Word had spread overnight, the real thief had confessed. People came from every corner to witness what would happen next. In the center of the village square, the young woman stood calmly, her face serene, her dignity unbroken. Before her knelt the guilty one, trembling, eyes swollen from tears, unable to meet her gaze. Around them stood the elders, the chief, and the very same villagers who had once raised their hands against her. The chief's voice echoed with gravity, "We have seen lies dressed as truth and truth beaten like a thief. Let us face the shame we brought upon ourselves." The guilty one sobbed and tried to speak, but the young woman lifted her hand gently. "Enough," she said, her tone calm but firm. "The truth has spoken already. What matters now is what we learn from it." The villagers lowered their eyes, unable to meet hers. One of the elders stepped forward, his face etched with regret. "Child," he said, "we wronged you in ways words cannot mend. Our hands struck you when your only crime was being near. We judged without reason and we let anger blind justice." His voice cracked with emotion. "Tell us what punishment you wish for them, and for the one who wronged you most." For a long moment she said nothing. Her eyes drifted toward the forest, where she had once wandered in exile, praying for strength. Then she looked back at them, her voice quiet but strong. "I was beaten and shamed," she began, "but I have also been taught. If I answer pain with pain, then I become what hurt me. If I answer lies with truth and cruelty with grace, then I remain who I truly am." A murmur rippled through the crowd, astonishment, shame, admiration. She continued, "Let no one be beaten again for what they did not do. Let the hands that struck me now learn to build, not destroy. My forgiveness is not weakness, it is freedom." Tears rolled down the faces of those who had once cursed her. Her stepmother, or employer, or accuser, fell to her knees crying out for mercy. The young woman reached down, helped her rise and whispered, "Carry your guilt, but let it make you better, not bitter." The chief bowed deeply before her. "You have restored more than your name," he said. "You have restored our conscience." He ordered that the guilty one repay what was stolen through service to the community, not through exile or violence. "Let this be our cleansing," he declared. "Let truth, not punishment, be our teacher." As the crowd dispersed, many approached her quietly, some bringing gifts of food, others simply bowing their heads in silent apology. Children watched her with awe, whispering that she carried the heart of a queen. That evening, as the sky burned gold over the horizon, she sat by the riverbank, the same place where she had once wept in despair. The water reflected her calm face, no longer haunted by injustice. She smiled faintly, knowing she had won the greatest victory of all, not over others but over bitterness. And as the first stars appeared, the wind carried her name softly through the village, a name no longer spoken with pity but with reverence. She had turned her pain into peace, her shame into strength, and her wounds into wisdom that would guide generations to come. In the days that followed the reckoning, the village slowly began to heal. Where there had once been whispers of accusation, there were now murmurs of admiration and quiet remorse. The young woman, once cast out in shame, walked through the same dusty paths with her head held high, not in pride but in peace. The people who once turned away from her now greeted her with bowed heads and trembling apologies. Even the children who had once mocked her exile ran to her side, carrying baskets of fruit and flowers as offerings of friendship and forgiveness. The elders called for a gathering under the great baobab tree, the same place where she had been judged and beaten unfairly. This time the drums beat not with tension but with reverence. The chief stood before the crowd and raised his hand for silence. "We wronged a pure heart," he declared. "In our haste to judge we became blind. But today we honor the one who showed us what true courage means, the woman who forgave when she had every reason to hate." A murmur of agreement swept through the villagers. They nodded, some wiping tears, others clutching their hands in prayer. When she was asked to speak, she hesitated at first, her gaze moving across the faces that had once looked at her with scorn. Then she took a deep breath and stepped forward. "Truth," she said softly, "is like the sun. You can cover it for a while but it always finds a way to shine through." Her words carried over the crowd like a warm wind. We are all capable of mistakes. But what defines us is not the error, it is what we do once we see the truth. The people listened in silence. Her calm, steady tone struck deeper than any anger could. She spoke of forgiveness, of patience, and of the courage to believe in one's own innocence even when the world refuses to. Her words were not those of bitterness but of deep wisdom, and they settled in the hearts of everyone present. From that day forward she was no longer seen as just a servant, a daughter, or a victim. She became a symbol of renewal. The chief asked her to take a place among the village council, saying, "One who has walked through injustice and emerged with grace carries a light that must guide others." Though she was humble, she accepted, promising to use her voice not for judgment, but for fairness and truth. Her once broken home also began to change. Those who had mistreated her worked to earn her trust again. Her stepmother, filled with guilt, tended to her with care, while the others followed her example of humility. The young woman bore no grudge. She smiled, helped rebuild what was broken, and used the treasure of her forgiveness to restore the family's unity. Seasons changed, and with each harvest, the village remembered her story, not as a tale of cruelty but as one of rebirth. They learned to listen before accusing, to seek truth before punishing, and to lift rather than break those who stumbled. At twilight, she would often walk to the riverbank, her reflection shimmering on the calm water. The air was filled with the hum of life and the songs of people who had once been divided but were now whole again. The pain of the past had not vanished, but it had been transformed into something stronger, a shared lesson, a promise that justice must always walk hand in hand with mercy. And so, beneath the soft glow of evening light, she smiled, not as the woman they had beaten, but as the woman who taught them all how to rise again.